Jim Chapman. Welcome to the LoVasco Briefing podcast.
Thank you for having me.
This is not an official podcast yet. We're just kind of getting started with things here, but I keep calling it the LoVasco Briefing podcast.
That sounds very official. I like it.
It does sound official. I mean, So what are we going to talk about today?
We're talking a little bit about fiduciary oversight, some of the common blind spots that plan sponsors may have with regard to what is fiduciary responsibility, what falls on their shoulders, what falls on our shoulders as advisors, and ultimately how to keep them bulletproof from a risk perspective.
Yeah. I mean, if we start really, really basic and we think about, like, we put ourselves in the shoes of that plan sponsor, let's say, and we can both think of clients that were in this spot where they inherited responsibilities to oversee a retirement program.
Yep.
And maybe they've got deep expertise in other areas of HR or finance, but now all of a sudden that they've got this retirement program that they've got to oversee.
Yep.
Right? I mean, just talk a little bit about like how they feel, like what their experience is initially. And I mean, I want you to speak from experience because, again, I know you've worked with a number of folks that have been in that exact boat. How did they feel? What did they express to you?
Yeah. I think my mind goes to like a few different examples. I would say the most common feedback I get from clients who are newer into serving on a retirement committee, acting as a fiduciary, is they're not always aware of the personal responsibility and liability that comes along with doing that. A lot of times, clients will say, this is a risk for the company, and while that's true, there's also a personal risk involved with serving as a fiduciary for a retirement program. And so I know that can scare people sometimes, and that's not what this is intended to do. But what it is intended to do is just be transparent and honest. Because I think sometimes advisors or people in the industry don't want to say that out loud and make people feel uncomfortable, maybe not want to be involved with the retirement program, but it is the reality of the situation that when you are a fiduciary overseeing a retirement program, you do have personal liability and potential risk to manage that plan prudently for your employees.
Right.
And so I think that may be the first item that we run into when we see new folks involved.
So you threw out a lot of great words there that our listeners may not understand what they are. Let's start with the word fiduciary.
Fiduciary.
I mean, we throw around the word fiduciary like it's common language around here. But in general, I mean, what the heck does it mean? Like, could we even get like basic and talk about what a fiduciary, the actual definition of a fiduciary is?
Yeah. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're hearing the word fiduciary, next time you watch the Golf Channel, you're guaranteed to hear it at least 5 to 10 times during a commercial break. So this will be insightful for you. Very basically, a fiduciary, essentially means you have to act in the best interest of your clients or for who you are managing a investment pool, retirement plan, whatever the platform is. So in the world of retirement plan consulting or 401ks, if you're a plan sponsor or someone who's sitting on a retirement plan committee of a company that's offering a retirement program, if you're a fiduciary, that means that you have to manage the 401k plan in the best interest of your employees and the participants. You have to manage that prudently. So, maybe to summarize that, it means to act in the best interest of your employees.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny. I've got this paper right here, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later. The Department of Labor, forget about us, forget about LoVasco Consulting Group as an expert. I mean, there's a document out there called Meeting Your Fiduciary Responsibilities from the Department of Labor.
Yep.
And if I flip into it, it's got a section that says, who is a fiduciary, right? And, it's got 4 significant bullet points here about what is the significance of being a fiduciary, specifically regarding overseeing a retirement program, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll read off, actually, there's not 4, there's 5 bullet points here. Because a lot of people say, like, gosh, I don't know if I'm doing this right.
Mm-hmm.
I was told I'm supposed to be a fiduciary, and there's a number of things that I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Yep.
So if I look at this, what are the responsibilities? Number 1, this is what you already said, Jim, acts solely in the interest of plan participants and their beneficiaries with the exclusive purpose of providing benefits to them, right? So that's solely in the interest,
Mm-hmm.
right? We cannot put the company's interest ahead of the plan. We can't put our personal interest ahead of the plan. We have to act in the sole interest of those participants.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 is carry out their duties prudently. Right?
Prudence, yeah.
Prudence,
Manage the plan prudently.
which we'll come back to that. The third one, follow the plan documents, of course, unless it's inconsistent with the ERISA law that governs 401k plans. Number 4, diversify plan investments and pay only reasonable plan expenses.
Yep.
It's funny how those 5 things, they feel really simple, but there's so much in each one of them. And, the one I want to actually unpack is the second one, carrying out their duties prudently. So, Jim, tell me a little bit about prudence when it comes to 401k plan, because we throw that word next to fiduciary. Prudence comes up the most when we're talking about managing a retirement program. And does prudence mean that we've got and I'm going to lead the witness here a little bit, but does prudence mean that we're selecting the best investments, that it means that we're picking the best record keeper? Is there some performance that the plan sponsor is supposed to be doing?
Yeah. So this is a good one to unpack. And I think what's good about this, but what could make this maybe a little more difficult to outline for plan sponsors is there is no hard and fast rule on what it means to be prudent. So to answer your question directly, no, you don't have to have the best performing investments. You don't have to have the lowest costing record keeping and administration provider. You need to have reasonable costs. You need to have a process in place to help monitor your plan's investments, to benchmark your plan costs. But if you ever read into some of the DOL guidance and ERISA law, it talks a lot about having processes and procedures in place to help mitigate your fiduciary risk, and documenting those processes and procedures and the outcomes of those processes that you're following.
So what I hear you saying is it's not about making like the best decision. It's about being able to have proof that you had a process for making that decision.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Right.
Do we want to get into some of the specifics around how we can put these processes and procedures in place, or do we kind of want to just dip our toe in the water right now?
Well, actually, I mean, from a high level perspective, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
If someone says, wait a minute, like, do I need to have how do I document? How do I even know that I'm documenting right? And how do I do that properly?
Yeah. I think it starts with like 3 core documents. So if you are offering a retirement program, you're on a retirement plan committee, kind of the first 3 items that we want to have in place are, number 1, something called a committee charter. And what the committee charter is, it's a document that outlines, number 1, who are the retirement plan committee members, and number 2, what responsibilities do we have as a committee, and what actions are going to take place to fulfill our fiduciary responsibilities. So that kind of acts as the first document to outline the process that we're going to implement in order to fulfill our fiduciary responsibilities. So that's the first document that we generally put in place. The second one is something called the investment policy statement. So an investment policy statement is another document. It's going to outline how we're going to monitor the plan's investment options on an ongoing basis. And one of the key items that you mentioned earlier was, we don't while we want to offer the best investment options, of course, it doesn't mean that we have to automatically remove and replace investment options when they're not performing exactly to our specifications. A good investment policy statement is meant to strike a balance between providing structure but providing some flexibility. We don't want to paint clients into a corner as fiduciaries.
So wait a minute, you're saying that like if we have funds to pick from, then if we don't pick the fund that performs the best over the last year, then we're not liable for the fact that we didn't pick the best fund.
You're not, as long as you can demonstrate that you follow the process, and you can document the rationale for why you arrived at that decision. Right. So, maybe to round out the investment policy statement, a good investment policy statement, we're going to have quantitative criteria that's going to ultimately shape our watch list and how we're going to monitor and evaluate investment options. But just because a fund doesn't meet our quantitative criteria, that doesn't mean it has to be removed right away. To your point, we want to allow for flexibility and allow us to follow a process. So maybe the last piece of this, I mentioned 3 documents. The last one's kind of a living document, but it's something that in my mind is probably the most important piece of all this, and it's good meeting minutes. Each time that we meet with clients and we're reviewing the 401k plan, we're documenting meeting minutes. These meeting minutes are essentially summarizing the conversations that we had. They're documenting any decisions that we made as a committee. They're documenting the rationale supporting those decisions. And, these meeting minutes are essentially the supporting documentation that we are following the prudent process that we stated in the committee charter. It's providing the supporting rationale, and that's what's going to help keep us insulated as a group from potential risk.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Jim, let's take a step back real quick. Going back to like the fiduciary and understanding who the fiduciary is, I think a lot of times there's confusion at the committee level on who actually is a fiduciary.
Yeah.
Probably the most obvious one is the person that actually has to sign plan documents, sign a 5500. They automatically assume that they're the main fiduciary, right? But are there other people that are fiduciaries, and really what's the line of demarcation between someone that is a fiduciary and is not a fiduciary?
Yeah, this is a good question. I like to get into this one. So I think, on the committee side of this, anyone who has the ability or authority to operate with discretion over the plan on their side is a fiduciary. Anyone who has the ability to make decisions that are impacting the plan, is also considered a fiduciary. Individuals who are performing certain administrative tasks like signing the 5500, preparing and sending out some of the notices, they're generally considered fiduciaries. Another interesting item is on our side of the house as investment advisors or consultants of 401k plans. If you're rendering investment advice for a fee, you are considered a fiduciary. Now, some advisors don't want to take on that fiduciary responsibility, so they will provide, I don't even know what they actually call them because they're not recommendations, but they'll provide investment reporting, but they won't actually, or they'll provide guidance and interpretation on the investment options, but they won't actually make recommendations to you as a committee.
Technically, as an advisor, if I sit down and provide you a report with 3 available options and tell them like, hey, it's up to you to make a decision, I'm technically not being a fiduciary because I'm passing off the final decision to the employer.
Correct.
And I'm not making a recommendation.
That's correct. Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But if you do actually make a recommendation and say, hey, we're recommending using XYZ fund, then inherently you become a fiduciary of the 401k plan and you inherit that risk involved with that responsibility. So maybe to summarize that, on the investment advisor side, anyone who's providing actual recommendations, we can get into some of the different types of fiduciaries maybe later on. On the committee side, anyone who's able to exercise discretion over how the plan's managed, anyone who is able to make decisions on matters involving the plan, or anyone who is carrying out certain administrative tasks. The most obvious one is taking on that responsibility of signing off on the 5500.
Right. Yeah, and like an obvious one that gets confusing. I don't know how many times that a client will ask the record keeper a question about plan design and essentially like ask them to give a recommendation. And they're clearly talking to someone that understands plan design and the mechanics of the adoption agreement associated with the plan. But then they get really frustrated when they say like, hey, well, what direction should I go? And they're like, I have no idea. That's up to you.
Correct.
That's by design, of course, right? Because they know they're not fiduciaries. All they can do is take direction from other fiduciaries. So they are very strict about saying, we're not going to give a recommendation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, going back to that committee member that just got the responsibilities to oversee a retirement program, they're sitting on the committee, and let's just imagine how they feel. There's a bunch of other executives around this table. Let's say it's a 3 or 5 person committee. This new person comes in and they're thinking like, it's the classic corporate structure where like, I should know everything about being here. Yeah. Right. What does that person do to figure this out? I mean, what path do they have? Yeah.
I'd say the easiest path is to engage a great consultant to help walk them through, a good fiduciary process.
Yeah. Well, that feels self-serving because obviously we're consultants, right, Jim?
Of course.
But if I go back to this document where it's the meeting your fiduciary responsibilities, does this document talk at all about like what a committee member should do, particularly if they don't have the expertise themselves?
It does. It's the DOL actually provides guidance that states if you don't have the internal expertise to manage your 401k plan or retirement benefit prudently, you should seek outside expertise to help you fulfill those fiduciary responsibilities.
Right.
Hence, where firms like LoVasco come into play to help fill that need.
Well, there's a significant reality that like a committee member could be sitting on a committee. There could be an advisor. Maybe there's not an advisor. And they're tasked with being a fiduciary. Maybe they even ask the chair of the committee, like, hey, what does it mean for me to be a fiduciary? And they just kind of get a simple response saying, just come here and provide your opinion on things. Yeah. There is a reality that if they, again, going back to our simple document, I don't want to pull up any of our documents because we could provide checklists and all those examples, but maybe those are self-serving. Maybe they're not. But if we look at a document from the DOL that says meeting your fiduciary responsibilities, this is exactly what the plan sponsor is looking to do, right? Yeah. If I flip all the way to the back, the second from the last page of this document is entitled Meeting Your Fiduciary Responsibilities, Tips for Employers with Retirement Plans, right? And on this page, there's literally, I think there's close to 10 points on this page that you could ask your committee chair and or the consultant that's helping you oversee the retirement program. Yeah. So that would be one of the first places that I would look.
For sure.
For a independent, unbiased, third-party advice of, like, am I doing the right thing? Yeah. Now, I will say this is a bit high level, and if you go through this and people don't have good answers to some of these basic questions, you probably want to talk to a dedicated consultant advisor that understands this marketplace. We have a number of checklists and evaluations and assessments that you can go through to figure out whether or not you're meeting your fiduciary responsibilities. So, we definitely encourage people to look at those things. But if I run down the list real quick, this on page 12 of this meeting your fiduciary responsibilities, some of the tips: have you identified your plan fiduciaries and are they clear about their to the extent of their fiduciary responsibilities, right?
Mhm.
If participants make their own investment decisions, have you provided the plan and investment-related information participants need to make informed decisions about the management of their individual accounts? Have you provided sufficient information to them to exercise control in making investment decisions?
Mhm.
Basically, are you checking the box from an employee communication perspective, right?
Yep.
Number 3, are you aware of the schedule of deposit participant contributions in the plan, and have you made sure it complies with the law? Jim, how many times did we get this question?
A lot. A lot.
Where, and how many times do we find out where, especially when there's been turnover at the committee level and the administration level of the plan,
Yeah.
where contributions, hey, like how often are they being remitted? You know, the participant makes contributions, right?
Mm-hmm.
We won't get into it right now, but that happens more
Yeah.
often than not. If you don't know how many days is legal to potentially delay that, then you want to be on top of that. If you're hiring third-party service providers, have you looked at a number of providers, given each potential provider has the same information, and considered whether these fees are reasonable for the services provided, right? This one really throws people off.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole evaluation process to hire every different provider,
Yep.
and there's a lot of work to be done to figure out what providers you should be using.
Yeah.
You know, both bundled or unbundled approach, and do you use a third-party administrator, or do you bundle that with your record keeper, and
Yeah.
who are all those people, right?
I kind of want to deviate a little bit and dive into that one if we can. There
Go
we
for
go.
it. Yeah.
I think a lot of times when I'm meeting with prospects or newer clients, and they have an advisor currently who maybe is signed on as a fiduciary, and I won't go super deep into the weeds, but maybe they're either a 321 or a 338 fiduciary of the 401k.
Yeah.
The plan sponsor will come to me, and I'll ask them about their fiduciary oversight process and what their meeting cadence is. Do they have a fiduciary file? Trying to understand how things are being operated. And they say, oh, we're not overly worried about that because we have offloaded all of the fiduciary responsibility to our advisor. They are the fiduciary. They sign out as a 321 or a 338. And while it is true that they are signing on and they are a co-fiduciary of the plan, it is not possible for a plan sponsor to completely alleviate themselves from all fiduciary responsibility.
Right.
Even if you have an investment advisor that's a 321 or a 338 fiduciary, you still have fiduciary responsibility to oversee and monitor and evaluate your investment advisor in fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility. So, in the absolute worst case scenario, if there was ever a class action lawsuit against the 401k or the DOL investigation because it wasn't being operated prudently, plan sponsors technically would still be on the hook. So I just wanted to get that out there because that's
Totally.
I hear that so much from people that, hey, I've offloaded the responsibility. I'm not responsible anymore. And I wish that were the case because that would make our job a lot easier just to tell people, hey, we're going to take this whole thing on for you. But the very honest and frank answer is you cannot completely offload your fiduciary responsibility as a plan sponsor.
Yeah. The other fascinating thing is, there's these plan sponsors that unknowingly think that, hey, I've got a fiduciary that's, said that they're acting as a co-fiduciary and they're alleviating my responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even confusing because even the document, the meeting your responsibilities, somewhat talks about offloading responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
But if you read it properly, it talks about, but you still need to evaluate that particular provider that you hired.
Exactly.
So you don't fully dissolve yourself of those responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
If I take it one step deeper, the thing that is fascinating is that we encourage plan sponsors to read that contract with your advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Even our contract where we sign on as a fiduciary investment advisor,
Mm-hmm.
all that means, right, is that we take fiduciary responsibility over providing recommendations regarding investments.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, how much of the work that we do is just providing investment recommendations for the fund lineup in the 401k plan?
I mean, it is a big piece of it. I don't want to downplay the investment component, but I mean, it's, I don't know, 15, 20%.
Right.
You know, if you talk to any one of my clients, our joke internally is that, you know, we're your outsourced chief retirement officer. And what that really means is there are so many other moving parts to a 401k plan that we're providing guidance and recommendations on to our client. And so, you know, to the point you're making, signing on as a fiduciary only covers that, you know, 15, 20% of what we're actually advising our clients on.
That's the big deal. That's the big deal. It's really relatively easy to get an investment advisor to come in and say, you know, what's the best, or like give me the right information to select a particular fund, and maybe even give me a recommendation of which fund I should select for a particular asset class.
Yeah.
But helping to manage the rest of the fiduciary responsibilities properly in a prudent manner is really where the value is in hiring a proper fiduciary advisor.
Yeah. And I feel like we're being a little not super articulate on what these other fiduciary responsibilities are. So like, you know, just for example, I'll just throw off a few quickly. You know, we talk about like benchmarking plan costs. We do things like share class audits. We're benchmarking your service providers. We're doing, you know, plan design exercises. We're looking at, we call it an operational audit, where we look at the provisions of your plan, make sure that you're operating prudently, you know, against those provisions, if there's any potential updates. But there's a number of other items that we're working on with plan sponsors. So I just wanted to give some context for people out there who are thinking, you know, what are the other fiduciary responsibilities besides just, you know, making sure my investments are good and, you know, my plan costs are reasonable. So hopefully that's helpful.
No, it is. And it's, you know, it's funny, like we got halfway down this tips for employers with retirement plans. And the very next one was, have you documented your hiring process?
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. For for the vendors you're using.
Yep.
And that's not just, that's the advisor consultant that you're working with, TPAs, record keepers, et cetera. Are you prepared to monitor your plan's service providers? Yeah. What does it even mean to monitor a service provider? Is it just fees? Because this document definitely says differently, right?
100%.
Right. Have you identified parties in interest to the plan and taken steps to monitor transactions with them? Ooh, you know, some may even be saying right now, what do you mean parties of interest? What exactly is that? And what should I be aware of? We'll get into that later. Are you aware of the major exemptions under ERISA that permit transactions with parties of interest, especially those key for plan operations, such as hiring service providers and making plan loans to participants? Yeah. Right? You know, that sounds really, really vague. And it can be potentially confusing. It is probably one of the more confusing parts of this document. But this one comes up quite often in regards to paying record keeping and consulting fees. Does the organization need to pay those, or can they charge the plan for those? And this particular exemption allows any sort of plan-related fees that are in the best interest of the participants to be charged to the plan, which is a good one. And then the last two, have you reviewed your plan document in light of current plan operations and make necessary updates? After amending the plan, have you provided participants with updated SPDs and SMMs?
Pop quiz. Who knows what an SMM is?
Or an SPD for that matter.
SPD.
Right? What is an SPD?
Summary plan description. This is a document that's just going to outline what the provisions of your 401k plan are, you know, eligibility requirements, entry dates.
Just plain language,
you know, plain language, easy for participants to understand.
There you go. And then the SMM, putting you on the spot. What
Summary of material modifications. So you know, throughout the year, if you made any material change to your 401k plan, maybe you amended one of the provisions, you have to send out a document, the summary of material modifications, that spells out exactly what changed, again, in plain language, so employees can understand, you know, their new benefit that's being offered. Yeah, that's good stuff. All right, so the last item on this tips for employers with retirement plans says, do those individuals handling plan funds or other plan property have a fidelity bond?
And Jim, it actually opens up a broader question.
Mm-hmm.
If I've been listening to this the whole time and I'm a committee member and I realize I've got personal liability.
Yeah.
Right? If I've downloaded this document that you guys were talking about here,
Yep.
and it talks about as a committee member, I have personal liability.
Yep.
So what is the best practice? I don't even want to be on this committee if I know that I financially have risk.
Yep.
But there's got to be a way to mitigate that. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So I think the first item is, what the DO mentions here, that fidelity bond. And a fidelity bond maybe is another way to say, errors and omissions insurance, where if you're a committee member and you're operating the plan and, there's potential fraud or an error that takes place that results in, a loss for the participants of the plan, this fidelity bond will make the participants whole for those errors that took place. But the biggest item to call out with the fidelity bond is this is not related to fiduciary responsibility. So you just compare and contrast, errors, that may happen in managing the plan and actual failure to meet your fiduciary responsibilities. The second item that we typically see in place, aside from that fidelity bond, is actually, fiduciary liability insurance for the committee members. So if you're a committee member, typically an organization will, purchase some fiduciary liability coverage for the members to help, keep them in better standing, feeling a little more comfortable with taking on this responsibility. But ultimately, the third component that we want to see in place is that fiduciary oversight process that we've been talking about a lot today. We don't want a company just to open up a 401k plan, get a fidelity bond, buy some fiduciary liability insurance, and call it a day, because that doesn't one, lead to good outcomes for their employees if there's not a process in place, and number two, having to go through something like a class action lawsuit or a DOL investigation, that can be time consuming, it can be costly even outside the insurance. So having that process in place, so you don't ever have to use these coverages is really the key component here.
So as a recap, if a plan sponsor really wants a gut check,
Yep.
Probably one of the first places they should go is download this guide. It's if you Google DOL fiduciary responsibilities of a 401k plan, this PDF document pops up and one of the top three things.
Sure.
Look at this guide. It's right from the horse's mouth of what your responsibilities should be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if this guide, I think, really only touches on the high-level points, and it's meant to be written in plain language so people can understand it.
Mm-hmm.
If it creates more questions than answers, then we like to recommend that people dive deeper into that. Mm-hmm. And we have a number of fiduciary checklists that go into the weeds.
Yeah.
Jim, I fought you off from diving into share class audits and the different type of service providers and all those different types of things.
Yeah.
We've got a number of different checklists and assessments that people can use to figure out, are they getting the guidance they deserve? And are they meeting their fiduciary responsibilities as outlined by ERISA? Mm-hmm. Right. So we encourage folks to, download and use those tools. They're helpful. There'll be links in the description down below. Jim, any feedback other than that, as far as if someone's listening and they realize maybe for the first time, this responsibility is much heavier than they thought? What is your key recommendation? And again, I'm leading the witness here because I'm asking a consultant what plan sponsors should do.
They should reach out to a consultant like LoVasco, go through an evaluation process. To the point you made, we have a lot of evaluation tools. We have a lot of checklists in place. A lot of times when we're engaged, no one likes to say they're doing free work, but we'll provide kind of a free look into the 401k and say, hey, here's what you have in place versus a checklist or best practices, and it gives people a starting point to give themselves kind of a thumbs up or a thumbs down with where their fiduciary oversight process sits. So, we'd love it to be LoVasco you reach out to. Having a good consultant is the first step, and if you're not sure, that probably means that you should take a closer look here, because a lot of what we talked about today is to your point, the very basics. So this is a good place to give yourself a gut check to figure out if it makes sense to dive a little deeper.
Yeah, that's a good point. And and I would say that starting off with before you even reach out, if you don't want to engage with somebody directly, use our assessment tool.
Mm-hmm.
You can go through, there's about 15 questions there. If you can't answer at least a 4 out of 5 on each one of the questions in that tool, then you may want to consider talking to an advisor, whether it's us or somebody else.
Yep.
And if you do decide to kind of take the next step after realizing there's some gaps in your fiduciary oversight process, the very next step that we do with folks, right, is kind of develop a blueprint for them. Where they give us some data on their retirement program, and we come back and give them an entire document that outlines where they're doing great, where they fall short, and an exact plan of what to do with it. Right? Yep. We do that free of charge, just because we think that it delivers a lot of value, and candidly, it'll open your eyes to what needs to be done. And if you want to go and implement that on your own, you certainly can.
Mm-hmm.
Or obviously, we were happy to help you implement that as well.
Yep.
So, Jim Chapman, thanks for being on the LoVasco Briefing. It's been fun. This is the first time in our new, our quasi studio here, AKA this is actually Chris Schuppe and Jason Zaran's desks here, right? We'll see where we shoot the next one, right?
Thank you, Chris and Jason.
Yeah, there it is. So now your wife knows what it was like being on a podcast. Now that she sees this,
yeah, we'll see if she gives me any tips.
Yeah, she'll be like, "Use your hands more. You talk more with your hands normally, don't you?" So,
trying to behave.
There you go.
No, this was fun. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Mike.